Pastor Josh here at First Congregational Church, and this is
Katie Johnson, and I am the Children's Discipleship Director here at the church.
And we've been enjoying going through all this first season of our podcast with you and just talking about life and different things. And recently we've been doing the stages of life. And we had planned out that we would have been done last week, and then I recognized that we kept talking about the other stage, that middle life to retirement part of life, and the length of life and what it is, and we can't negate that stage of life either.
Or neglect it.
Or just, pretend, well, once you got through young adulthood, you're good to go.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of life left after that. I actually think I'm in the best years. It's in, some people might want to stick in their 20s, but I kind of like where I'm at in my mid-40s. It works pretty well. I enjoy it, and it's good. So we should talk about that and the different aspects of that, like we've done with the other ones, how we interact with each other, how other generations can interact with us, and that type of stuff. Because we're in a stage, and you were just talking about it, I'm not quite there yet, but we're in a stage where some people in the midlife are parents. Many of them are, some are not, but many of them are parents. And now they're in the process of either thinking about, I have to take care of my parents, or some are already doing that.
Yep.
And there are some who have lost a parent. So it's a totally different type of parenting thought process. My family, I have everyone in the adolescent years now, and that's different than being a parent of young ones. And where we sit in life. And so just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So in my stage, and I'll ask you yours next. In my stage, my parents are retired, and they live far away from us, and they're living independently in their own house. I have a sibling that is right near them, and so there's understanding. We communicated and we talked, but I'm not in the stage of I need to worry about how to take care of them. What will happen when my dad is no longer mobile, or if something happens with my mom, but it does cross my mind, because my parents, they had to do that for theirs, or my in-laws have had to do that for theirs as well. But some of my grandparents have since passed away. So you kind of see that on the forefront.
It's a stage of life.
It is a stage of life. And at the same time, I'm in the middle of a career, and I love what I do. I love the career. So in that case, I'm in a good place. I'm not in the midlife crisis place, as they like to say.
Oh, that's good.
That's good. That's a plus. And I have kids that are getting into junior high and high school, and it's a totally different aspect because some of them are thinking in the next couple of years, which to me doesn't sound far off. A couple of years sounds really close to me.
You know better.
I do.
For kids, it seems like ages still.
It seems like an eternity to my children, but for some of them, they'll be out of the house in a couple of years, and, as my stage, I'm thinking freedom in some ways, because I have a little more capacity. I'm not thinking about that child as much. I know I still will worry and do those things.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to be the taxi driver. You're not going to games.
I'm not doing all the provision. I'm doing all of this, and that it does change that. So that's where I am in that stage. I'm not in the stage yet where I'm even thinking I'm going to be a grandparent. I'm not close to that. So I'm in that middle life. And then how do we fit that middle life within our faith? Which sometimes, if you're like me, you've been a believer for a very long time. I didn't say you've been a mature believer for a very long time. You've just been one. Since I was a child, I grew up in the church. So there's that middle part of life where it's almost like the 16th mile in a marathon. I still have a lot to go, and I've gone a long way. And do I start walking now? But the whole goal is you keep running, so you got to keep running. I've done a half marathon, so for me it was probably around mile 10 or so. I've done a lot of this. I got a little bit more to go. I'm all by myself out here. I need to just keep going, or do I just slow down and walk? Do I take a break? And you can't do that. I mean, in life we've tried to, but that's what it feels like sometimes in our faith. There's a lot to go, and everything keeps changing. And now I'm going uphill on something, and you have to walk through those. And so I'm going to ask you about where you are in your stage, like I described.
Yeah.
And then let's talk a little bit about some rhythms that help us through that, and maybe what would be helpful for other people to interact. So that's where I am. You're in a slightly different stage than I am. So where are you in this stage?
So all of my kids are young adults. I have 3. One is out living on his own and has been since college, and the other 2 are still at home.
Yeah.
So that's different. We talked last week a little bit about parenting
Yes.
young adults, so that's definitely.
So that came out of some experience.
Oh, yes. Indeed.
Yeah.
And my parents are 94 and almost 92.
Okay. Yeah.
And they are quite a ways away and have just moved into assisted living. And both of my siblings are local for them.
Okay. So there are siblings close by.
Yes, which is wonderful. And, you know, my brother cooks dinner for them on Monday nights and my sister comes. And so every week they get to see their children, or some of them.
Some of them.
And get caught up on the news. And, you know, I mean, because my mom has a smartphone, but she doesn't always remember to look at it.
Yes.
It's not as good communicating on it. Hasn't quite figured out yet how to answer it when it rings, for instance.
Yes.
But is reasonably adept at the texting side of things. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for their age, my parents are in really good shape. But you can tell, you know, for instance, their long-term memory is excellent. They can remember names and places and the whole bit. But short-term memory is definitely struggling.
Yes, absolutely.
And COVID increased that, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because they weren't stimulated.
Yeah.
It was just the 2 of them at home.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they're used to going to the symphony and going to lectures and that kind of thing.
They kept their brains active through life.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. They've always been lifelong learners.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So your stage is a little further along in that sense, and you can see other parts coming. So what do you do in this middle session of life? Like your kids are now young adults, but some are still at home, which you're very helpful with them, but giving them that independence, and nothing wrong with that at all. But what do you do on the personal side? Like here we are somewhere in that middle stage. Not quite. You're not retired yet. You still work here. You kind of retirement might be over there, but it's not yet. So what do you do to keep on the faith side, to keep a fresh perspective, to keep that energy going?
Well, it's actually kind of interesting because I homeschooled my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my youngest finished high school and he had gone off to a 2-year college, it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? You know, there was a certain point where it was like, okay, I've got these projects that I want to do, but I really had this sense that God wasn't using the gifts that he had given me, or I wasn't able to use the gifts that he had given to me. And that lasted for at least 4 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Of just this restless feeling of, I should be doing something, but I have no idea what it is. And then, of course, you called.
Oh, I didn't know I was part of that.
Yes, you called and said, would you mind doing this part-time till we can mount a full search for a replacement?
Right. And so for the listeners, I came to this church right as COVID hit. We didn't know it was going to. The timing was the timing was definitely God's timing. And in a leadership perspective, for me, hindsight, it was really, really good. We had a tragedy soon after that where about 6 months after that, where our children's ministry director at the time passed away. Suddenly passed away, and it was very difficult. And so, not knowing any of what you just talked about, just knowing that people recommended you, that you worked with children, I said, you know what, you could step in if you wanted and just help out in this interim with intention. You know, we're going to kind of walk through that, and we would open it to others if need be. And that's how you ended up where you are. And we've kind of walked through a lot of things and processed that.
And you know what? I feel like God made me for this job.
Oh, that's great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is what he had down the road for me, but I couldn't see it. I had no idea.
Right.
I thought that this job was going to be a lot more just administration. You know, ordering the curriculum, taking the attendance, counting the offering, you know. Blech.
I don't.
For me.
Yeah, we don't do it that way.
No. But God knew.
Yeah.
And so because I was willing to take that step of, well, sure, I can fill in for 6 months while you mount a full,
in the middle of COVID and we're all shut down and what are we going to do?
Nobody knows what's anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was no one to train me because the person who had had the job before had passed away. And so COVID was actually a blessing for me too, because it gave me time to find my feet and figure out which end was up and what needed to be done and so forth.
And most of, not all, but most of the volunteers, it's hard to connect during that time.
Right.
Zoom or do something like that and do that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like even for you and for me, sometimes even in coming in this process here, you don't have to be stuck in what you've been doing.
No.
Like you were the mom, you were the teacher, you were this, and then for 4 years you were like, I am what? And it was a big question mark.
It was totally.
And I think that happens to a lot of people, and they may not have the ability to say I am what and not have a job, but they may say I am what and they're stuck at an office, or I am what and they're stuck in the same thing that they're doing, but really feeling an angst. Mm-hmm. Like there's something more. And I think maybe it's part of how your parents raised you, but that the fact that we can continue to learn, that in my view, especially of faith, that God is still working on me, that I'm changing, that I'm honing skills. Like you don't have to be stuck there.
That's right. And
it might take, and what I like about your story is it might take several years in the process.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming, I mean, you didn't just jump at the opportunity. I remember you were like, I'll think about it.
Because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'll think about it. Is this right? I'll check it out. I gave you the 6 month, like you can, no harm, no foul. You just hold us out on this point. If we find someone or whatever.
It's like being the substitute teacher.
Absolutely. And had you decided, this isn't for me, we'd still be friends. Would be any problem with that?
Right.
But you have this. Do I take this next step? And I've heard of that as people in the middle of career, middle of life saying, we joked a little bit about midlife crisis, but it's that idea like, since I'm 18, I've only ever done this one thing, or I've kind of fumbled through a lot of jobs. I'm the one that had every different job in the world. I worked all different places. All the people joke about that. What job haven't you done? And part of it was, for me, I was running away from ministry. I think I knew I was supposed to be in ministry, and I ran away from it growing up in it. But the other part was just which part of it is right. I love music. I thought about being in music ministry, but that's not. I am skilled in music, but I'm not gifted as a music leader. Mm-hmm. Learning that, I did youth ministry for a while, but there was an angst even in that. Mm-hmm. Until really coming into pastoral leadership. And then coming here is kind of like what you said with what you arrived at this job as well. When I came here, this was the first church where I was leading a staff. Mm-hmm. and really had a direction and really, having to work within the culture of the church too. But that portion of the team, I'm a team person. It was the first time that I was really able to lead a team fully. I mean, that's why right now I'm in a wonderful place. And it's not always easy here. Things aren't always great. And back and forth, we have bumps on the road.
Yeah.
But the sense right now, like, this is where I belong. Mm-hmm. And we can sustain that. But I also have the sense of, kind of like 15 years from now, God may be saying, oh, there's another thing for you here because I'm growing your skills this way. I'm growing. Yeah. And I think that's an encouragement to people to think of that, where you are in life, whether you have those grandparents you're going to take care of in the forefront and you're going to have to back off some work over here as you can do that over there. Mm-hmm. God is still able to use you, not despite of, but within the situations that you have.
That's right. And
they may change drastically. You might have to leave a job or change a job, or
a spouse could be ill, or I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen. For sure.
Yeah, I'm in a stage, and I'm sure you are too, where I've had friends whose spouses have died. A close friend of mine passed away, and he was a little younger than I was. And so anybody in that stage, we're starting to get in that stage where we know sorrow. We know life can change at any moment, and not just we know it. Like as a teen, you're like, yeah, I kind of know that, but we know it. Yeah. And then I believe the later stages, when I speak to people at like our 1045 service, it's mostly retirement crowd. They don't just know it, but they feel it. And then there's two things that come with that I find interesting. There are those that feel it, and they're just like, well, it's the end of life. We're just going to kind of enjoy and coast through. And then there are those, and there's several of them really in their 70s, 80s. One of them's almost 90, and they're like, I only have so much time left. What else can I do for God? What am I learning? One of the guys who's a snowbird and he's returning, he's now like, he became an elder. And he also like learned our media stuff so he could be up in the media booth helping. And he didn't know it. He's like, but I can learn. I can be a part of this. And there's this vibrancy that I hope I have if I make it to my 90s, where I'm still learning. And I'm still going, I want to learn that new thing. But yet still be founded in the faith that God has given me. That he is what doesn't change. The love of Jesus doesn't change. That gospel doesn't change.
Right.
But the world definitely changes tremendously. Tremendously.
Yes. And we can all vouch for that one.
Yeah. So what do you do in the rhythm of life itself to kind of help that? We talked a little bit about the career side and these things, but what about, if someone's listening and they're going, okay, that's great, but I'm in the dredges right now. And I feel those 4 years that you're talking about. What do you do in the rhythm of life or whatever to kind of maintain some of that walk with the Lord?
Right. Well, as a prelude to that, one of the images that I got in that stage was I felt like I was in a boat that was in the fog.
Oh.
And I couldn't tell how close land was.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Land, in this case, being God, what God wanted me to do next.
Yeah, the port.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be really close to land and not even know it.
Yeah. Fog is that way.
Yeah. And so in terms of hope, don't give up hope because God doesn't waste anything.
Yeah.
He never does. And what might feel like waste to us is actually more of a waiting time or a time where he's developing skills in you that you're going to need for what he has next for you. So don't despair. But one of the things you really need to do, I think, while you're waiting in a situation like that is stay close to God.
Yeah.
And learn to listen to him because more often than not, he talks in a quiet voice. It doesn't come like a 5-year-old shouting, "Mommy, Mommy!"
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you, let me rephrase that. So I'm assuming then during that time, you were trying to be intentional to listen.
Yes.
Okay. That's something that I struggle with. I have a lot of attention. My attention gets squirrely sometimes. I like to be moving all the time. Moving to the next thing, go to this thing, like it's project. If I have one meeting after the other meeting, sometimes it's like that's a lot of meetings, but I'm like, but my day went by.
Did you want it to go by?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, and I also feel like I accomplished something, like I did something. Like
there's that.
There have been times like I go on vacation sometimes, and I have to be told, remember you're on vacation, because I don't know how to settle the brain and just say, okay, I'm not going to, and I'm just going to listen, or I'm just going to actually pick up a book for myself, not for study, and read, and intentionally listening or spending time in that sense sometimes seems difficult in this world. Yeah.
Sure.
So what do you intentionally listen to, or how do you do that? What are some of your things that you use for that?
I would say the best place is Scripture. And the thing is, in my experience, you can't go looking.
Yes.
You just have, as part of your devotional, you should have a plan.
A plan. Some type of plan.
Some type of plan. What type of plan? It doesn't matter. You could be reading through one of the Gospels and just taking, 2 or 3 verses a day and just thinking about them and, have a study guide that goes with it or something. It doesn't matter. And then God can use Scripture anyway. And if you go looking for something, often that is your mind trying to direct it.
Yeah.
As opposed to letting God call the shots. And I think in our culture, especially, you're encouraged to be me-driven.
Yeah.
It's what you want. It's what you perceive as the right path. And that's not the way God.
Yeah, and I think in the seminary theology speak, they call that eisegesis.
Do that.
Eisegesis is where you take your thoughts and force it into Scripture. And so part of the reason, even the way we preach on Sundays, we walk through a book of the Bible as opposed to picking out verses. It's a lot harder to do eisegesis. It's not impossible. It can still happen.
Sure.
It's just a lot harder because you're walking through all the context of something. Mm-hmm. Like even what you said, like grab a couple verses, but you didn't say grab a couple verses. You said walk through a gospel, or you're walking through a story and letting that consistency of it help you. And I think consistency in however we choose to spend time with the Lord. You know, some people need quiet and prayer. I have listened or heard from God the most, I should say, however you want to put that. Usually after a time of study, I'm contemplating something, or I'm like really struggling with the sermon. A lot of my devotional and sermon world kind of mix for me. Not all pastors are that way, but for me that works really well. And I'm just struggling with this piece, what we're going to do. I usually hear, not audibly, but hear, or the connection, or the brain just fires off like there it is. It's usually while I'm running or while I'm exercising. So for my own mental health, for my physical health, and a lot of times for my spiritual health, I maintain the discipline of exercising. You know, and just the same way where like when I first started, I could only run so long or so far. Yep. But the consistency of it is why now I can run a lot further. I can do this, and I have goals now of things I never dreamt of in life. It's the same with Scripture. We start consistently. You know, 10 years from now, you may have spiritual goals or things that you want to do for the Lord that when you first started 10 years before, you said, oh, no, never. God will never give me that, or I'll never, that's too big for me. And now you're just thinking, yeah, that's the next step, you know, because that's where God has you. One of the things that I have a book here talking about the rhythm of life, is that I until someone highlighted this book to me, you know, we talk about everything we do. Like God says, in Scripture it says we bring everything, we pray without ceasing, you know, bring the prayer to Him, and, you know, bring all your anxious thoughts to Him, always praying. So this book, or these little journals, are called Every Moment Holy. And it takes that idea of every moment of life is a holy moment of life. It's unto the Lord.
Who is it? Oh, Brother Lawrence.
Yeah.
Medieval monk.
Yeah.
Said one of his holiest moments were washing dishes.
Yeah. So every moment holy takes that, and they create what's called liturgies. Liturgies are just a process of worship, an order of some type of worship.
I know liturgy has a bad...
It tends to have a bad
connotation.
Thing. Yes. And because we mostly think of liturgy in a very, very traditional service, or a very Catholic or Orthodox service, but every single worship service out there, every gathering of believers, they have a liturgy. You could be the most contemporary church ever, and you have a liturgy. And I've worked in some of those churches. I did lighting for, you know, Second Baptist Houston, and, you know, you seat over 5,000 people in your thing, and
that's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling, you know,
here in New England.
I'm running the light, but we didn't have a paper that said the liturgy. But when your pastor who's up there, he's got so many services. After this service, he's got to get in a car and drive to Katie's and do this, and you're running this time. We had a prelude, what they would have called, you know, prelude, just, and then every moment, the process, the scripted, the worship, the songs. And there was some leeway in there. This pastor was very interesting. We actually had a lighting system for him to let him know time was running out. And sometimes it would get to red, and he didn't care. He'd just keep going. That's someone who's just like, I'm here to preach the gospel, understanding that there's this. But there's a liturgy. And the liturgy, even at our church, we have a prelude time. And then I like to do announcements first, because I don't want to really move us into the mode of worship and then be like, let's get some announcements. You know, so
it
it's
disrupts
that,
the flow.
Right. And so that liturgy is just that walking through of it. And so Every Moment Holy talks about liturgy in life itself. And I hadn't even considered that until I picked this up from a friend. And I'll show it. I'll put a link in the description. I know they have a website. I think they even have an app. So I think there's a pay part to it where you can get like daily ones or different stuff like that. I don't do that one. I have the book. So
I'm all for books.
I'm all for books. I have that. And it's digital as well, so you can get it on your Kindle or whatever. But just reading some of the liturgies, this is volume 2. Volume 1 is the gray one. This was the original one. And for those who went before, and those who walked beside, and those who will follow after. So this is just kind of like for everybody out there. Listen to some of these liturgies. A liturgy for one who is employed. That's almost all of us, a liturgy for those who employ others. Here's one, a liturgy for laundering.
I do that.
Yeah, I do that. I was doing some of that last night. Very interesting. Like, they're really thoughtful, and maybe we could come up with many more, but listen to these next three. They're all about food.
Ooh.
A liturgy for preparation of a meal. Mm-hmm. Okay. A liturgy for preparation of an artisanal meal. See, it's different.
Yes, it is.
And then the last one, which I'm sure a lot of people in my stage are like, I need that one. A liturgy for the preparation of a hurried meal.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they have plenty of that in life. They have liturgies about creation and recreation, the blessing of celebration, petition, and a liturgy for a sick day, petition and provision. They have liturgy for those who cannot sleep. One for one who suffered a nightmare. Here's one for a lot of us in the middle stage of life, a liturgy for paying of the bills. Oh, yes. Now, do you ever think of paying of the bills as a moment holy to Lord?
No, and I certainly don't think of it as worship.
Right. And then they have a section on lament and sorrow.
Sure.
But there's lots of, it's not just like, there's probably 15 different liturgies here for types of sorrow. As a matter of fact, that's what Volume 2 is itself. Volume 2 is just every moment holy, death, grief, and hope. So this has to do with all types of sorrow and grief and the hope that we can have. And it's not just the death of a person. It's so much more. Many things can die in life. Very phenomenal, I think. And then they have Liturgy of the Moments, liturgy on hearing a birdsong, which it's springtime right now. I've been hearing a bunch of them.
Yes.
And so I haven't gone to it, but maybe this afternoon or tomorrow, if I hear a bird again, I might pull this out and just walk through that liturgy. Yeah.
It sounds like these help you sort of stay in the moment.
Yeah.
And not zip through it to get to the next thing.
They do.
Help you, yeah.
And remind you, and some of it is, I haven't gone through all of them. Some of it is just that, I wonder what a liturgy would be in this moment right now. I'm kind of, the moment that I'm in, I wonder if they have one for that. And then it reminds me.
Oh, recording a podcast?
Yeah, recording a podcast. It reminds me, it also reminds me that every moment does need to be holy. This one I have used, liturgy for waiting in line. And then a liturgy for road rage, experiencing road rage. Oh. If my heart were more content in you, O Lord, I would be less inclined to rage at others. Let me gauge by the knot in my gut the poverty of my own understanding, of the grace that I have received from a God who, loving me, chose rather to receive wounds than give them. Take from me my self-righteousness and my ego-driven demands for respect. Overthrow the tyranny of my anger, O Lord, and in its place establish a better vision, your throne, your kingdom, your peace. And so, if you could have that, or
food for thought,
but next time you're driving, you get a little frustrated out here, and these windy roads of New England, we get a little frustrated. I get a little frustrated sometimes. Maybe it's just me, and people really enjoy out here to drive a good 5 or 10 miles below the speed limit. I do not. And I need to learn the liturgy.
Take a deep breath and listen to the bird song.
And listen to the bird song. But isn't that, I think, where we are in this stage? That we need to learn, because so much more is coming at us at life, to take a deep breath. Listen to the bird song. Listen to the Lord, to find every moment holy. When you are able to connect with your parents again, to find that moment holy. To hear from your siblings about, we went over and made dinner, and to enjoy that. Maybe instead of being jealous that you can't be there. I'm sure that piece. I'm guessing that may creep up.
Absolutely.
But every moment holy. And I think in the church, if we learn to do that, it can be helpful, even in all of our conversation, even to the younger generations, because they see that.
It helps with contentment.
Yeah, it really does.
Because our society encourages us always to want more.
Yes.
In whatever format that looks like. But it's always more. And more doesn't make you feel content.
No.
It's been proven over
it's
and
true.
over again.
And I think the only more that we could do is have the more of Christ, more of God, and looking for that. And it does drive contentment. It's not like you're never going to not get that more. He will always give you more. Even in the 4 years of waiting in fog and question, you're still getting the more. As you look back, you realize you were here and then you were over here without even knowing it.
That's right.
And
because the movement
years.
Was so slow, but it was still movement.
It was still movement.
The other thing that's interesting before we close is that in the Bible, nobody ever retires.
It's true. It's true. We've talked about that. I've mentioned that, I think, before we actually got online. I mentioned that people don't retire in the Bible. Now, they had lots of children, and they lived with their family, and people took care of it. And so society changes, but the retirement, in the way sometimes we see, especially in American culture, is I've retired, I'm done. And some people even see that, I've retired, I'm done, I'll just float by, even in the church. You can retire in career, retire in life. You can go buy your snowbird house or, whatever, and enjoy that. But the calling on you should always be, what does God have for me? I'm still here. What does God have for me?
God doesn't want to waste the gifts that he's given me.
Right.
And all of my life experience has great value.
Yeah.
So how can I use that to his glory?
Yeah. And I think even in those times, retirement has slowed. Some people have already slowed down, but they've stopped listening. So just like the midlife, learn to listen, but continue listening.
That's right.
And I think that's the key to that. So maybe we'll leave you guys with that thought. In this life and intersection, we probably could go a lot longer on that, but in this life and intersection of life is that we would find our rhythm to learn to listen to what God has for us. I think it's a good place to end.
Because he does have stuff for us.
He does, absolutely, in every season, even if you're in the fog.
That's right.
And I think that's important to note, Even if you're in the fog, something is happening. God is working. So just be encouraged. God is working. And take the time. Find your rhythm, whether it's through a book, through something, through someone's help. Find your rhythm to know him and to listen. Sound good?
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.